it's Miss Lockhart here. Welcome to algebra class today. We are going to do a review of solving quadratics by factoring and the quadratic formula. Remember that all of your assignments can be submitted still from quarter 3 or from this e-learning quarter. Remember that e-learning is 50% of your final grade. My office hours are Monday through Thursday from 10 to 11. The link is on my haiku page. If you need more one-on-one help, you can email myself, not Miss Santilli. I don't know why that says that. Email myself for a private office hour, and we will work together through those assignments. There is no e-learning on May 4th and May 5th. These are teacher work days, gives us time to get our lives together and plan for the rest of the school year. So this is a great time for you all to catch up on any missing assignments that you might have. I really appreciate your hard work so far. This quarter, this has definitely not been easy or the smoothest, but you all have taken responsibility and ownership of all of it, and you're really doing a good job. So keep up the good work. So my only announcement, I guess, is about chicken roast. So if anyone likes chicken roast, I'm going to tell you how to make it. All you need is a whole chicken from Kroger or your favorite grocery store, okay? Some baby carrots, some chopped potatoes, and seasoning. Lots of seasoning. You want to bake it at 375 for about an hour. And, you want the foil on for like 30 minutes and then the foil off for 30 minutes so that you can get that balanced texture. And voila, you have a meal. So let me know if you try it out. I would love to hear from you on the celebrations, announcements, and struggles section of your IP. Most importantly on this before we start slide is down here once again. So if you're unhappy with your grade after you submit your assignment, please email me for help, okay? And then you can redo the assignment for a better grade. I grade for correctness, not completion, okay? So your answers do matter, so do not leave blanks or IDK because that will get you a score of 0. All right, let's get started. So our lesson for today is called Solving Quadratics Equations Review. We'll be reviewing solving a quadratic equation using factoring and the quadratic formula. If you do not know how to solve a quadratic using the quadratic formula, please stop this video right now and watch the more quadratic formula video from 427 and 428. All right, so let's review. When finding the x-intercepts of the equation, that is called the zeros. Okay, we want to find the zeros or the x-intercepts. So we can find the zeros in 2 ways. The first way that we can find the zero is by factoring. And the second way that we can find the zeros is using the quadratic formula. Let's review both of these. First, let's review solving a quadratic equation using factoring, okay? In order to solve a quadratic equation using factoring, there are 3 steps that we must follow. You want to write the quadratic equation in standard form. Then you want to factor the quadratic. And then use the zero product property to find the zeros or those x-intercepts. Okay. Now, to solve a quadratic equation using the quadratic formula, there are also 3 steps. So we want to change the equation into standard form, identify A, B, and C, and then use the quadratic formula to find those zeros or x-intercepts. If we solve using the quadratic formula or factoring, we can use both methods on a quadratic and we'll get the same answer. Let's try this out. So I want to solve this quadratic here by factoring. X squared minus 6 equals x. So I'm going to start by solving this quadratic by factoring, and then I'm going to solve the same quadratic using the quadratic formula, and we'll see that we get the same answer. So the first thing I need to do is I need to write x squared minus 6 equals x in standard form. So what that means is I need to subtract my x from the right side to the left side, and I need to write it in standard form. So x squared, then minus x minus 6 equals 0. Okay, so now my quadratic is in standard form. Now let's identify a, b, and c. So a is going to be 1, b is negative 1, and c is negative 6. So I need to find two numbers that multiply to a times c, which is negative 6, 1 times negative 6, and adds to equal b, which is negative 1. So those two numbers are going to be negative 3 and 2. Once I find those magic numbers, I can plug them back into my solution here. So we're going to have x squared minus my first magic number with an x behind it, plus my second magic number with an x behind it, minus 6 equals 0. Now we want to factor by grouping. So I'm going to group the first two and the last two together. I can take out an x from my first group here. And then I can take out a 2 from my second group. So what's left inside the first group would be an x minus 3. And inside of this group would also be an x minus 3. And this is all equal to 0. So now I can write my final factors. So my first factor is going to be x minus 3. And I want to remove x minus 3 from this step above so that I can write my second factor. My second factor will be what is left. So what is left is x and then this positive 2. Okay. So now that we have our factors x minus 3 and x plus 2, there's one last step. We need to set both of our equations equal to 0 and solve for x in both cases. So I'm going to add 3 to both sides for this one, and I'm going to get that x equals 3. So this is my first 0. And then my second 0 comes from using my second factor, which is x plus 2 equals 0. I'm going to subtract 2 to solve for x. So x will equal negative 2. So the zeros for this quadratic, x squared minus 6 equals x, would be x equals 3 and x equals negative 2. Now let's use the quadratic formula in these 3 steps to solve the same exact quadratic, x squared minus 6 equals x. We should get the same x values for our answer. So step 1, just like by factoring, is to write the quadratic in standard form. So we'll subtract x from both sides, and we'll get x squared minus x minus 6 equals 0. Next, we need to identify a, b, and c. So a is 1, b is negative 1, and c is negative 6. Now we can plug our a, b, and c values into the quadratic formula that I am boxing over here in red. So we'll have x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2 times a. So I actually want to go ahead and fill in the variables now. So b goes here, so -1 plus or minus b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. Our next step would be to simplify our work. So we'll get 1 plus or minus the square root of 1 plus 24 all over 2. This gets us 1 plus or minus the square root of 25 all over 2. And this simplifies to 1 plus or minus the square root of 25 is 5 divided by 2. Okay. Once we get here, we need to set up 2 equations to account for this plus or minus symbol here. So our first equation is going to be 1 plus 5 divided by 2. And we're going to solve that. And our second equation should be 1 minus 5 divided by 2. So for our first one, we get 6 divided by 2, which gives us 3. And for our second one, we get -4 divided by 2, which equals -2. So our first x value is 3. And our second x value is going to be -2. Okay. If we go back to solving the quadratic with factoring the same one, we also got x equals 3 and x equals -2 as our answers. So what this tells us is that we can solve quadratics using either factoring or the quadratic formula. Great job. Go ahead and go to Haiku and find the IP for today for reviewing quadratic equations. You can use this video, your notes, and office hours to complete the IP. Email me if you have any questions. Today's code word is break. Enjoy your break May 4th and May 5th. See you soon.